Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming on today's meeting, on today's Zoom meeting. My name is Fahdina Qanitah, who will be the first, conducted the presentation with the first chapter under the title Language Learning and Teaching. Dear my friends, just listen to me and just take it easy, but please listen with your full attention, because in the end of the presentation, I hope you guys could make a nice discussion in the Q&A section. Okay, let's check it out. Please, next slide. Okay, let's start with a regression. Let me read the slide. Teaching a second language is hard. Are you sure you want to do that? Why is it hard? Let's go. Next slide, please. Okay, guys, let me recall again about the second language acquisition. Why teaching a second language is hard? Because teaching a second language is not only studying the language, it's all about acquire the language. It's about getting the language. So the goal of us as the second language teacher is making our student to our that second language, not only make them studying the second language itself, make them studying the target language or English on this term, but make them acquire the language. So please, next slide, please. Okay. I will start with a long opening, and it is still on the opening of my presentation. Before we are going into the language learning and the teaching itself, let's start with lots of questions that we need to be considered. We need to be aware when we want to be a second language teacher. Let's start it with the how is the learner characteristics. Okay, this is like an intermezzo. Like we need to be aware with those 8 factors to make sure that we are ready to be the second language teacher. We need to know about those 8 factors. Let's get started with the first one, learner characteristics. What are on the learner characteristics? We need to ask ourselves as a teacher, like, who are the learners that we are teaching? What is their ethnic? What is their first language and their religious heritage? And then, what are their native language? How is their level of educations? And how is their intellectual capacities? Those are in the learner characteristics, okay? And then the second one is our consideration to get to know, to be aware of as the second language teacher is about the linguistic factors. What are on the linguistic factors? It is like our question to our student, like what our learner must learn about. And then what does it mean when we say someone knows how to use language? What is the meaning of someone who is knowing a language? We need to aware of about that kind of questions. And then also like what kind of material that our learner must to be mastered. Those are the basic questions that we have to be aware based on the linguistic factors. And then there is learning processes. What are questions on the learning processes? The first, like, how can a person ensure success in language learning? And then the second one is like, how long the frequency, the learning frequency that we have to give to our student, like what kind of material that is more suitable to our students. And then age and acquisition. the like our consideration, is it like children and adult, which one is the better one who is absorbing the language itself? Our awareness that is it when we teach a children, so we can get the successful, is most likely being successful in teaching, or when we teach an adult, it is most likely to be successful when we teach adult. Like, we need to know about these basic questions of SLA. And then the next one is the instructional variables. The instructional variables is like what is the optimal length of time which is required for a good teaching of a second language? Like, is there any limitation, the best limitation, the best requirement, the length of teaching which is the most effective as a teacher? And what is the active learning? How active that the active learning that we want to in our second language class? And number 7 is about the context. What are the questions on the context that we need to be aware? It is like the context is something like when we teach a foreign language or a second language, we use a fake environment of that target language. So are you sure that using that fake environment is effective for us, for our students, for our learners in their journey of learning that second language? And the last but not least that we need to be considered is about the purpose. Purpose comes from the learner itself, comes from the students itself. Like, what is their purpose on learning this language? What is their motivation? Is it like a very highly motivation to learn a second language, or are you really motivated on learning an English? Like, if they are not that motivated, if they are not that strong, their intention is not that strong, so we can consider that most likely their teaching journey will be failure. But if their purpose on learning a second language or a foreign language is really high, then it will be the benefits to the learner or to the students itself. So thank you for listening to the opening. So let's get into the main material. Please, next slide, please. Yep, thank you. So we as a teacher will face a possibility. What is the possibility? After considering the previous 8 factors that we need to be aware of. So if we fail on teaching, so it's okay, like embracing our failure as a second language teacher. But please highlight my my words, like there is no any failure in teaching a second language, because even though we see our students or our learner is not giving any improvement anymore, but it's not considered as failure, but it is like they're still processing, they're still progressing. So please don't feel you are a failure teacher, you are a bad second language teacher. So let's hug each other. Okay, next slide, please. Never back down, never what? Never give up. So, even though there is a possibility of being fail of a second language, but at least now I will present you a material about the very basic definition about learning, about language learning and teaching. So it will decrease the possibility of being failure on our journey in teaching a second language. So please, next slide. Yep, this is about the language. An intermezzo about the definition of the language itself. It is like used for communication, whether it is verbal or written, and then language as a set of arbitrary symbols. Like we agree that the meaning of this one is it is, so it is the language, which is formed systematically. So let's get into the first thing about language that we need to be considered. It is said that explicit and formal accounts of the system of language on several possible. What does it mean? It is like we need to equip ourselves about phonological, syntactical, lexical, semantic analysis, those things. We need to equip ourselves before we teach our learners, our students, in terms of a second language learner. So if we have equipped ourselves with this first point, at least we have reduced the possibility of being a failure second language teacher. Let's get to know on the second point, which is the symbolic nature of language, the relationship between language and the reality. It's all about the philosophical language, how the philosophical meaning of the language, and also the historical of the language. If we set our time to read more about what is language, how is the historical history of English language, for example, at least we have equipped ourselves to reduce our failures, the second language teacher in the future. Let's get into the third point. What is it? Oh, equip ourselves with phonetics, phonology, the rule gestures, body language. Yeah, the third one, semantics. Number 5, language is communication system. As a speaker or a hearer, so language is also an interaction. Sentence processing means like the rules of the sentence or about the grammar itself. When we have equipped ourselves about the sentence processing, how to process English, how to form English, how to make subject, predicate, object, noun, and etc. So we have equipped ourselves as a second language teacher. So number 6, it's about dialectology, linguistics, pragmatics, bilingualism, and SLA. Yeah, I think you guys have already known about um the benefits of learning those things. Number 7, human language. Okay, language, a human and non-human communication. Ooh, are you sure? It's too wide. It's too wide discussion when we want to talk about non-human communication. Just let's focus on the human language itself. Number 8, language universal. Like when we equip ourselves with the it gets back to the first one. No, get back on the second one, that how is the history of language when Adam and Eve, for example, come into the world, and how they form a language, for example. What I'm trying to say is like, how is the very first language in this universal, in this world, in this earth, when we have equipped ourselves with those kind of historical, when someday in the future our student have will ask us how is the historical language in the universal, so at least we have already equipped ourselves with those kind of knowledge, so reducing our possibility of being failure as a second language teacher. So I think you guys have already heard about the important things about language itself. So let's get into the learning and teaching. Please, next slide. Okay, let's focus on the learning first. I'm shadowing the teaching, so focus on the learning. What points that we have to be considered, that we have to be equipped ourselves about learning? The first one, learning is acquisition or getting, like I've told before, SLA. So learning is not about studying, but it's about acquire and getting, something like that. The second one, learning is retention of information or skill. Yeah, learning is retention of information and skill. The third one, wait a minute. The third one, learning involves activeness. Learning language involves activeness because one of the use of language is for communication. So we need to use it actively, using the language actively. The fourth, learning is relatively permanent but can be forgotten. The fifth, learning involves some form of practice. Reinforce the practice. The last but not least, learning is a change in behavior because learning language is a part of our culture. So it is like a change in behavior. So please next slide, getting to know about teaching. Okay, let me read the slide. Teaching cannot be defined apart from learning because teaching is guiding and facilitating the learning process itself, enabling the learning to learn, setting the condition for learning, such as the teaching style, approach, methods, classroom techniques, something like that. So those are things that we have to be considered, that we have to be aware, that we have to dig more about those kind of knowledge to make sure that we are not going to be a failure second language teacher in the future. So that's all about my presentation. So I welcome for the Q&A. I welcome for questions, whether you guys have or not, whether you guys have the silliest questions, I welcome about it. You can raise your hand or type it on the chat box. I'm waiting for it. Share yourself. You want to type it? Yourself. Go ahead.
I have a question.
Sure.
All right. So in correlation to second language acquisition, right? Are students more likely to remember new words if they are funny or vulgar?
Funny for sorry, I couldn't catch it.
If they are funny or vulgar.
Ah.
You got?
And then
That's my question.
Like, let me read it here.
Okay.
Okay, students to remember the new words which are funny or vulgar. Is that?
Yes, if they are funny or vulgar. Yes.
Thank you, Biondi. Let me keep your question first. I'm sorry. Okay, please unmute yourself, Apip.
Okay. Am I clear?
You are.
Okay. So I want to ask about a point in learning and teaching, the fourth one. Learning is relatively permanent and can be forgotten. I just want to ask that in regarding language teaching, how does exactly a learner uh, are learning in ya produk dari learningnya itu bisa permanen, tapi bisa juga dilupakan in language teaching konteks.
The question, let me read it. Yeah. Please give me example of a second language which can be permanent but also forgotten, gitu kan?
Could you explain the process of how someone could forgot a language, for example?
Someone. Do you need a correlation with the permanent one?
Yes.
I see. Okay, thank you. Thank you for the question. So like while I'm trying to rearrange the answer and it's azan, so please just relax and just stay on this Zoom. I need several times to prepare the answer. Thank you, guys. Getting back here. Let me call Biondi and Afif. Are you here?
Yep.
Okay, thank you. Biondi, are you with me?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Okay, thank you. So thank you guys for the questions. I'm trying to answer. If you want to discuss it again, like sentence to sentence, it's okay. Let me try to answer for the first question from the Biondi. The question is, in SLA, students more likely remember the words which are funny and vulgar. Is it okay for them to remember those? My answer is, it is okay. It's okay for them to remember those funny or vulgar words because it is related to the authenticness and about the maybe how the culture, how the socio-cultural on the land of the language itself. But we need to underline that those funny and vulgar words don't come from us. We don't teach those kind of funny or vulgar words, even though they are authentic. Just let acquire those funny and vulgar words from internet for something, for example, and then when our students have already acquired those kind of funny words, vulgar words, we as teacher need to prevent the unwanted things. What is it? The prevention ways is the we need to teach the cultural sensitivity. We need to give the explanation that it's okay on the USA, for example, to say those words, but it's not okay for us in the Eastern culture to say those kinds of words. That is my answer. Do you want to ask further, Biondi? What will you say about that?
So what if, so like you said that if we were like to let the students acquire them naturally to their exposure to the internet, let's say, and so you also said that we need to prepare for that. Why couldn't we just, tell them to not use them in the first place, like beforehand? You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, it will be automatically we say that when someone say, for example, fuck on the classroom, and then we will automatically say, don't say that word, darling, don't say that word, honey. And then yeah, so the answer is yeah, you can say it directly. Don't say that words on our classroom because we need to obey the rules on our institution, on our culture. And also, please add an addition information about the cultural sensitivity itself, about their culture and our culture. I think something like that.
What if the children like keeps continuing on with saying like fuck, shit? What if they don't heed our words?
Give them punishment.
Punishment like what?
It will be depends on the kind of students. It can be yeah, let's search for kinds of punishment which is more suitable on the 21st era after this. I think that's the best way, the best answer. If you ask me of punishment that is more suitable for them. So is it enough?
Have you yourself received such punishment before?
I've never. I was a good student and passive student, so didn't have any punishment on
But
my
do you like to
experience.
swear?
I didn't swear in front of my teacher, so is it enough for this session?
I think it's enough. It's enough. Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Biondi. So let's get into the second question from Afif. The question is, how is the process of someone? How is the process of a learner who is learning language when the language is being permanent, but it's also forgotten? How is the process? What does it mean? Okay. Let me try to answer it. How is the mechanism of a language which is permanent, but it is also forgotten? Let me give you an example. When we want to say cucumber, like, timun apa ya? Bahasa Inggrisnya apa ya? Oh, cucumber. Like, the word of cucumber is already fossilized on our brain since we were kindergarten, for example. Like, we have already known it was cucumber, but it was just forgotten. It was permanently stay on our brain and our storage of vocabulary. But there are some conditions that make it forgotten. So first, it was the mechanism, that it was the process that I want to tell you. I think it's already answered your question, but I also give you some addition. What kind of condition that could make a language is, for the first one, it's permanently stay on our brain, but it's going to be forgotten. The first, quality of usage, utilization of that language, how much we use those the words of cucumber in our life. It's rare, right? It's only when we want to go to the market or when we want to eat salads, for example. So the frequency of utilization can the effect to the permanent and being forgotten. The second one is the internal intervention. What are they? Such as we are being nervous or under pressure. So we can look for those kind of words on our brain. It's about age factors. Like yeah, naturally we forgot what we have already learned in English, we as the second language. I will give back to Ak. What will you say about that?
Okay, so just for a short clarify, so apa sih? Kayak someone can forgot about language aspects, even though it is a permanent, because like mental or psychological factors, or like and what do you mean by forgotten is not that uh, it's not that it is erase from your head, but it actually more like you having hard time to recall those aspects. Is it right?
Wait, that's what I mean. That's
Okay.
a clear definition that you have been told to me.
Okay.
Forgotten
Okay.
is not being gone from our brain, but it's just like freezing. So we are hard to recall it again. So I think that's enough for those two questions. So I end my presentation. That's all from the first chapter, language learning and teaching. My name is Fahdina Qanitah. Thank you for your attention. I'm sorry if I made mistake. The last I say, good afternoon. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Okay, am I audible?
Yes, yes.
Okay, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Selamat Aditya, and today I want to present you my presentations about first language acquisitions. This is the book Principle of Language Learning and Teachings by H. Douglas Browns. And next slide, please. So today I want to discuss three things. First is theories of acquisitions, and the next is the key issues, and the last one is the language development itself. Next, please. So for the theory of acquisitions, so we need to know first what is first language acquisitions. So first language acquisition refers to the process by which infants and young children naturally acquire their native language. So this first language have many approach in it. So there is three theories of acquisitions. So the first is behavioral approach. So the behavioral approach is that believe that language learning is a result of habits formations through conditioning and reinforcements. B.F. Skinner's open conditioning is a notable example for behavioral approach. So B.F. Skinner's suggesting that the children learns language through imitations and reinforcements, but they came with the challenge. So the challenge for the behavioral approach is first is the lack of empirical evidence. So critics argue that there is insufficient empirical evidence to support the idea that children learn language solely through imitation and reinforcements. And the second challenge for behavioral approach is the underestimations of internal process. So this approach is criticized for not accounting for the mental process involved in the language acquisitions. And the next approach is a nativist approach. So propounded by Noam Chomsky, this theory argues that humans are born with an innate ability to learn language. So Chomsky introduced the concept of the language acquisition device, or LED, hypothetically tools in the brains that help children rapidly learns and understands language. Same with the behavioral approach. This native approach have a challenge too. So the challenge, there's two challenges here. First is variability in language acquisitions. So critics point out that the Natus approach does not explain the variability observed in children language acquisitions. And the second challenge ones is overemphasize on syntax. There is a belief that Natus theories overemphasize the role of the syntax in language learnings. So they neglecting other linguistic elements like semantics and pragmatics. And the last approach one is the functional approach. So this approach suggests that the language development is guided by its communicative functions. Language is learned as the children use it as a tool to interact with their environment and express their needs. Next slide, please. So we came to key issue points. So there are some key issues regarding on these chapters. Here's some of them. We have competence and performance. We have comprehensions and productions, and we have nature versus nurture. And for the competence and performance, this distinctions refers to the difference between a person's knowledge of language and their ability to use this knowledge in actual communications. And next one is comprehensions and productions. Comprehension itself is the ability to understand the language points. The ability to understand language inputs, such as spoken words or written text. It involves recognizing vocabulary, grammars, and the overall meaning of what is being communicated. So in this first language context, typically they develop therefore productions, meaning children understand language before they can speak or write it. And for the productions, this is the ability to produce language outputs, which includes speaking or writings. It requires not only a grasp of vocabulary and grammar, but also the ability to construct coherent message that other can understand. So these two aspects are crucial in the language acquisitions. Comprehensions typically proceed productions, meaning children understand language before they can express it. This sequence supports the idea that the ability to comprehend language forms the basis for the ability to produce language. So the relation between comprehensions and production is dynamic. As a children's comprehensions of language increase, it facilitates their language production ability. The two processes are interdependent, with improvements in one often leading to advancements in the other. So the next point is nature versus nurture. So this debate concerns the extent to which language acquisition is genetically programmed or influenced by environmental factors and learning. So on the nature side, that they argue that language acquisition is an innate ability. So basically genetically pre-programmed within humans. So they believe that children are born with a language acquisition device, LED. So they are behaviorists or universal grammars that allows them to learn any language naturally. And for the nurture perspective, argue that environmental factors such as social interactions and exposure to language play a crucial role in the language development. According to this view, children learn to speak by imitating the language they hear around them and through reinforcement and feedback from caregivers. Next slide, please. So we came up to the language development insight points. So by looking at the natural process by which children acquire their first language and how this insight can be applied to language teachings, there's 3 points that I want to share. First is natural process. So it emphasizes that children acquire language naturally and effortlessly. This process includes understanding the structure of language and the ability to communicate effectively without formal instructions. Essentially, children immediately grasp linguistic rules and patterns as they interact with their environments, leading to the development of their native language skills. The recognitions of this natural process informs language teaching practice. So, encourage the educators to create the environments that mimic natural language learning conditions and prioritizes meaningful communications over rote memorizations of rules. And the next point that I want to share is insight for teachings. So from studying how individuals acquire their first language, educators can gain a deeper understanding of the natural process involved in language learning. This knowledge can then be applied to second language teachings by adopting methods that mirror this natural process, such as meaningful input and natural communications. By integrating this insight into teaching strategies, educators can create more intuitive and effective language learning environments. So the next point that I want to share is the applications in the classroom. So by knowing how people acquire their first language, educators can apply those theories in the classroom, such as real-life communications. This approach helps students to see the practical applications of language skill, and then we have emphasizing comprehension expressions. This focus should be understanding the meaning of words and sentence, and being able to use language to convey thoughts and informations. And we have the natural learning conditions. So the classroom activities should aim to replicate the immersive experience of a natural language acquisitions, where learners pick up language through exposure and meaningful interaction rather than through explicit instruction of grammatical rules. By applying those language teachings, can become the language teachings can become more effective, engaging, and aligns with the innate language learning process that individuals experience when acquiring their first language. Next slide, please. Oh, okay. Okay, that's all from me. If there are any questions, you can ask me. Okay. Yes, Fahdina.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for this change. Thank you for the presentation. My name is Fahdina Qanitah. I learned something new from your presentation. I really like the nativist. Is it nativist approach? Yeah, right. Nativist approach. It's about nativist approach. It's new for me, so me kind of skeptical about it. Can this approach is being used in learning English? We as Indonesia as our first mother tongue, our first language, our mother tongue. How is the mechanism of nativist approach when we learn English as Indonesian? Is it clear?
Can you repeat it?
How is the process of nativist approach in English? We as Indonesian learner. Thank you.
Is that beyond the questions?
Yeah, that's mine. In native language development, children tend to make up their own words instead of using real words. Itu ketinggalan tuh mau bertanya, kenapa tuh? Why? Why is that?
Okay. Thank you. Okay, I want to answer questions. Which one? From Fahdina first. So Fahdina said that how is the process of native based approach in learning English as Indonesian learners? So the native approach to learning English, particularly for Indonesian learners, is the same like how children acquire their first language. So there are some principle. There are some principle for principle core for this approach. So native approach. No, sorry. So the first principle for us Indonesian learners is natural acquisitions. So this could be like listening to music or podcasts or watching movies and show and having conversations with native speaker. But I think to having conversation with native speaker is very rare in here. So gaining in listening to music and podcasts or maybe watching movie and show is the naturalization for Indonesian learners. And then the next principle is focus on communications. So Indonesian learners need to prioritize more communicates rather than achieving perfect grammar right away. So this create more relaxed learning environment where you're not afraid to make a mistake. And the next principle is intuition over rules. So nativist approach believe grammar rules are internalized substantial through exposure rather than needing explicit memorizations. This can be helpful for Indonesian learners as the grammatical structure of Indonesian and English so different significantly. So, but there's things to consider for the natives approach. So, the first is a need for supportive environments. While immersion is a key, some initial guidance on pronunciations and basic sentence structure can be helpful, especially at beginnings. So the environment itself is crucial. Like a first language, the native is approach is same, needs a really good environment to support the acquisitions of the Indonesian learners. And then the next considerations is limited speaking opportunities. Like I said before, finding opportunities for spoken interactions can be challenging because in Indonesians we don't actually have the this we don't have that opportunities to have foreign people come here. And then the next consideration is grammar can fall behind. So because the native is more focused on how they communicate, so the grammar itself can be fall behind. So for the grammar acquisitions, they got really have slower because they don't really learn grammatically. Overall, the nativist approach can be a valuable tool for Indonesian learners. So, especially when combined with other methods that address specific needs. Things that's the answer for the Fahdina questions.
Okay, that's very clear. Thank you so much.
Okay.
So nativis is like acquiring the language by
Yes.
daily activities. So is it like a long life learning journey when we use nativist approach?
Can you explain more the long?
Yeah, long life learning journey, like we need lots of time to acquire that language.
Yes.
Okay. All right. That's very clear and enough. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Fahdina, for the question. And then the next question is from Biondi. So why is that in an active language development, children tend to make up their own words instead of using real words? So there are a couple of reasons why children make up words as they learn language. So first is filling the gap. So sometimes a child might not know the actual words. So for something they want to talk about, so maybe it's a new object they haven't encountered before, or a complex idea they can quite grasp. So they invent a word that makes sense to them based on their understanding of the words and the sounds they can already make. And the next the reasons is experimenting with language. So language learning is a fascinating process for children. So they are constantly figuring out how words work, how sound combine to create meaning, and how sentences are structured. So making up word is a way for them to experiment with these rules and see what happens. It's like playing with the building blocks to see what they can create. They don't really know. They just experiment with the language. And the last reasons is learning by analogy. So children are engaged at noticing patterns. So as they learn a new words, they might start to see how suffix and prefix change meanings. For example, after learning walk and talk, they might invite Lucky for see. This is them trying to apply a rule they observe to a new situations. I think that's the answer for the questions from Yoni.
Yes. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, Yoni. I think that's all from me. Thank you so much for the attentions. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.